Hi, I'm Andrew Schmidt. I'm an assistant professor of emergency medicine at the University of Florida in Jacksonville. Today we're going to talk about optimizing media in medical education. Now to start off, this web link will take you to the handout that has all the information you need to know about this talk. It'll have all the major points as well as links to references. So optimizing media in medical education. This is a very important topic. We've all spent hours, if not days, putting together lectures, and we want to have the most effective message for the audience. But if we don't use media correctly, it can really tank a otherwise very good talk. Now I'm going to focus on PowerPoint because that seems to be the platform most of us are using, but all the points I'm going to talk about can be translated into things like Prezi or Keynote as well. Now PowerPoint's been around for a couple decades, and the idea behind it is great. It's to provide a simple platform that has drag and drop capabilities that can allow someone to efficiently and effectively take their message and relay it to an audience in a kind of entertaining and exciting way. The problem is there's too many bells and whistles built in that we feel like we have to use. And because of that, often our talks become complex and pointless. There's too many things going on, and we are often feel inclined to put stuff in there that doesn't need to be there, and it takes away from the message we're trying to give to the audience. So our goal should be to provide simple and purposeful education. So anything we put in that presentation should have a goal of simplicity. And along the same lines, it should have purpose. No media, text, information, nothing should go into the lecture that does not have purpose within that lecture. Now, I'm fairly young in my facultyship, but I have been lecturing internationally for the past 12 years or so, primarily on the topic of drowning resuscitation. And during that time, I've obviously learned a lot about what makes a good lecture and what makes a bad lecture. And so that's going to be the basis of this talk today. Throughout the talk, I'm going to kind of go back to my lectures in the past and show an evolution of what I've learned and how that's changed the way that I present the information. Now, along the way, just like most of you, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of medical education lectures, and the majority of them were not effective, to be honest. It really takes seeing that one effective lecture to make you sit back and say, oh, that's what a lecture can be. And so folks that have really helped show me that are people like Scott Weingart, also Zach Shiner, and then also I've listened to podcasts from Ross Fisher, who I'll talk about in a second, who developed what's called the P-Cube method of presentations. So some important references I use for this lecture are, first off, the book Slideology. Second, Presentation Zen. If you read nothing else on presentations, you have to pick this book up. This is what really set me down the path of trying to figure out what makes a good, effective presentation and what takes away from a good, effective presentation. This is definitely a must read. Also, the PQ'd presentations. This was covered on MRAP last year by Ross Fisher, and he has a website that goes through his method for deciding how an effective presentation is made and the components of that presentation. And what he kind of touches on is that there are three main components to a presentation. There's the story, there's the media, and then there's the delivery. So today we're going to focus mainly on the media. And we're going to focus on three types of media. First, we're going to talk about text, which some people often don't really consider media. We're going to talk about photos and images. Then we're going to talk about videos. So it's important to understand that this is all my opinion. Okay, it is based on a good amount of research and study on this topic, but everyone has their own opinions as to what a good and effective lecture is. So just take that for what it is. So first off, we need to talk about overall design of your slide presentation. So the very first thing that you see when you open up PowerPoint is this. When you start a new presentation, this is the first thing you see, the template. And this is the first step that sends people down the wrong path. Again, just like PowerPoint, the idea of the template is noble. It's trying to give you a simple box to put things in. It's going to give you an area that you want your title. It's going to give you an area to put your bullet points. It's going to make it easy for you to bring up an image or a video. But all it does is really restrain us and really try to fit unique information into a box that may not fit that information. And it doesn't use the slide real estate very effectively either. So this is an example of a template that I received. It's a group that I teach for in Europe, and before the conference they sent this out and said, hey, please go ahead and put your information on these slides and use the conference template. Well, the problem with that is that if you outline the box that the text goes in, that's all you're seeing right there. That's the amount of what I like to call slide real estate that you're taking up. So imagine if you did that on a painting, and that's as much of the canvas you used. It's kind of a waste. Remember, your slide, that's your canvas. You're trying to paint a picture for the audience. And so if you're only using that much of the canvas, you're not providing an effective display of the information you're trying to pass on. So the very first step is honestly accepting that you rely on templates too much. And what that will allow you to do is kind of break the chains. I know it sounds kind of dumb, but it's true. And we need to kind of take a step back every now and then to reevaluate what we're doing in lecturing and medical education and try to figure out if there's some simple ways that we can improve our overall design. So here's an example of what I do when I open up PowerPoint. When I open up a blank presentation, the very first thing I do is go to the View tab and go to the Slide Master. Now the Slide Master in PowerPoint shows you all the overall templates for the presentation. And what I do is I pull that blank template up under the title one, so now every time I click that new slide button, what pops up is a blank slide. And I can put whatever I like on it. And so the first thing I see when that new slide comes up is a nice blank canvas that I can start painting my picture for the audience. So, like I said, we need to keep things simple. And there's a couple of nice steps that are brought out in the books that I talked about. And mainly they are restraint and preparation, simplicity in design, and naturalness in delivery. So those first two, restraint and preparation, that means restraining your ideas to what's important to the audience and making sure from the very step one that you're providing a simple message. And then the next step is simplicity in design. So one thing that really helps both of those steps right there is having one idea per slide. So we often put 4 or 5 different things on a slide with the idea that we'll then read them off just like a teleprompter to the audience. The problem is if there are 4 or 5 ideas on your slide, the audience is going to be on number 4 before you're done with number 1. We know pretty well that audiences are able to read slides faster than you can talk about the information. So if it's up there, they're going to be reading it, and they're not going to be paying attention to what you're trying to tell them. Another nice little rule is a 3-second rule. So the 3-second rule says that the audience should be able to look at your slide and within 3 seconds kind of figure out kind of what you're talking about, and then turn their attention back to you to deliver the message. So that's where it comes back to simplicity. If there's a bunch of jumbled stuff on your slide, they're not going to be able to interpret it in 3 seconds and turn their attention back to you. It doesn't mean they need to be able to read a slide full of text in 3 seconds. And we'll get to that, and that's why we want to minimize text. But the 3-second rule just keeps the idea of simplicity in mind. And then the most important thing, kind of what actually all this ties into, is your signal to noise ratio. So the signal, that is whatever you want the audience to take into their brain and take home with them. That's the message you're trying to give to the audience. The noise is anything that gets in the way of you transmitting that message to the audience. That can be a number of things. I'm going to show an example slide here in a second, but you can see that noise can be lots of different things. So on this example slide right here, I have a signal I'm trying to give to the audience. And that signal is, the goal is to optimize the signal to noise ratio. That's what I want the audience to walk away with. Unfortunately, there's a lot of noise getting in the way of me transmitting that signal to the audience. There's a big red flashing signal word that keeps flashing. There's multiple different types of font that kind of make it not so easy to read the slide. We have bullet points with lots of text. Now the audience is trying to read multiple layers of text. We have an image that's pretty low quality. We have a big logo for the university that's taking up prime real estate. And we have a background that's just really not necessary and doesn't really serve any purpose within the presentation itself. So here's some examples of some previous presentations I've done. We can show how the signal to noise ratio was optimized a bit. So this was one of my slides from years ago, but the whole point of this slide was that hypoxia is a main cause of morbidity and mortality and drowning. That's what I wanted the audience to walk away with. I wanted them to walk away with that word hypoxia in their brain. But you see all these things taken away from that. You see bullet points, you see multiple colors of text, you see a not well placed, not well sized picture that really doesn't have much to do with anything. Again, it's just going to take away from my ability to give that message to the audience. So from what I've learned the last couple of years, this is my new slide. This is one of the first slides that pops up in my lecture. And there's no way they can't walk away from that lecture without remembering that word hypoxia, because I've decreased my noise and I've optimized my signal. So now we talked a little bit about design. We'll talk about the first type of media, and that's text. So again, a lot of people don't really realize that text is a media that needs to be used appropriately. So first we'll talk about the first broad categories of text. There's serif and sans serif. And all serif is that flattened out foot at the bottom of some of the letters. Now the next slide I'm going to show is going to have a very long sentence on it. And actually it's the most words you'll probably ever see me put on a slide. So if you want to, you can close your eyes and I'll read it to you. But the whole point is to see how serif lettering works. First, we're going to talk about the common fonts of serif, and that's Times New Roman, Garamond, Courier, and Georgia. You can see all these fonts. If you look at the bottom of most of the letters, they have a flattened out little foot. So here's that body of text I was talking about. It says, serifs are intended for a long sequence of words that exceed one line. They have little feet that guide the letters into each other so that letters appear connected, and to help the eye stay within the line of text in dense copy. Serifs possess varying line weights that help the eye identify the letter quickly. And that's from the book Slideology that I talked about earlier. So if you read that, you see that's the whole point of serif lettering. It allows long lines of text to flow well. Now the problem is we should be avoiding long lines of text within slides. Again, that's noise. So serif usually actually isn't the best font or type of font to use within a slide presentation. Now here's sans serif. So sans just means without, so it's without those little flattened feet. And some examples of sans serif is Helvetica. That's Apple's go-to. There's Futura, one of the oldest fonts that we have in computer systems. There's Calibri, and that's Windows go-to for PowerPoint. And then Arial. Now, sans serif fonts are used for headlines, and that's why they're important in PowerPoint or any medical education presentations, because we should be focusing on headlines. That is the signal, and that's the message you want your audience to walk away with. So anything below that, any other type of subheadline or any type of text is going to be noise. Your signal is the headline, and that's why sans serif work very well in presentations. We need to avoid multiple types of text. So we always think it's kind of fun and we'll make it exciting for the audience, but it just makes it hard to read. When you have maybe a fancy cursive one or kind of an old school one, you're trying to make it more enticing for the audience. It actually just takes away from the message you're trying to give to them. So always stick with the classics. There's reasons the classics are the classics, because they're proven, they're easy on the eyes, and they work across multiple platforms. So we should also minimize the number of fonts we use in one slide and also one whole presentation. Ideally, you should never really use more than two. And honestly, in my opinion, you should really just ever use one font. So instead of having a different font for headlines, subtitles, and captions, use one font and then you just use different weights. So for headlines, you can bold it or make it larger. For normal subtitles, you could just use the normal font. For captions, you can actually, on most of these fonts, use a lightweight, and it just makes it thinner lines. So again, just by using different sizes and different weights, you can get your point across. Here's an example from my current drowning resuscitation lecture, and what I want the audience to walk away with is that 91%. I want them to know that number and realize how big of a burden that is in low and middle income countries. So that 91% is enlarged and it's bolded. And the rest of it is the same font. That's all Calibri. It's just different weights and different sizes. So it emphasizes the message and the signal that I want to get across. So we've all run into this before. We've spent hours making a nice presentation and we threw some fancy fonts in there because we want to make it fun. And then we go to a different computer and it doesn't work. Your formatting's off, that computer doesn't have that font, and everything gets messed up. And that's one of the worst things that can happen right when you're ready to present. So by sticking to the classics and the ones that are built into programs like PowerPoint, you won't have that problem. Okay, if you go to really any version of PowerPoint, it's going to have those basic fonts, those basic classic fonts built in, and so you won't have that problem across different platforms. So when talking about text and how to use it effectively, I kind of touched on the fact that we should only be really using headlines. Well, this is another problem with the templates. The first thing a template does is ask you to click to add text to a bullet. The template almost forces you into using bulleted text. The idea behind bullets, again, is noble. The whole point is to try to kind of put in an outline format, just quick bites of text that you can then talk about to the audience. But we end up using those kind of things as teleprompters. And also, like I said, if there's multiple bullets on there, the audience is going to read ahead of you and not be paying attention to the message you're trying to give. So this is a nice example that if I was talking to you about this, I'd be talking about that first point, and by the time I finished, and yada yada yada, and again, you'd be all the way through all those bullets by the time I got off of bullet number 1, and you'd be doing something else. So we need to remember what bullets are and why they're there. The whole point of bullets and things like and outline formatting is that it gives that first big bullet's your headline, and below that you have second, third, fourth level information, the not so important information. So again, talking about fonts and bullets, we want to stick to headlines. PowerPoint and our presentations need to be relaying the headline to the audience, and that's all we really need to put up there. The headline's a signal, everything else is the noise. All right, we will give the rest of the information to the audience. That's why they came to listen to you, was to get that information, but we need to give them the headline so that we can meet the 3-second rule, so they can then turn their attention back to the speaker. So sometimes you have to use bullets, or you have to use numbered lists, especially medical education. If you're talking about a procedure, you might want to show a process or a physiological process. You may want to actually have the motion of reading through a list of text so that it makes sense in a timeline manner. Well, there's a couple ways to do this. So maybe I wanted to use that same bullet list from before. There's multiple different ways to do this, but what I like to do is I like to copy that slide, and then I'll go ahead and paste the slide a couple times, and usually I paste the number of slides equal to the number of bullets on that list. And then once I do that, I'll go back to that first slide with the bulleted list. I'll highlight the text I don't want them to see, and I'll change the color to the same background color. I don't delete the text because that will kind of change all the lines and shift text around within your text box, but I just make it the same color as the background. And I do that successively through all the slides in the timeline there. And what that does is, as you can see, it just makes it so you can now progress through the bullets. It takes a little bit of time, but now again the audience is now just getting one idea per slide. They're seeing that you're working your way through a list, but it's just one idea per slide, and they're not able to read ahead or even read back, and the attention is on the speaker. So going back to that noisy slide we talked about before, and knowing some of the things that we just talked about, how can we improve this? Like I said, sometimes we feel very reliant on bullet points, and the main problem is, like I said before, they become a teleprompter. They make us look back at the slide and try to read off what's going on so we can stay on the same line as the audience. It's very distracting. So I talked about breaking the chains and admitting that you have a problem. So if you realize you have too many bullets or too much text in your slide, there are a couple steps you can take to try to minimize that. The very first thing is go to that slide and go ahead and highlight the main points. I want to highlight that signal that you want the audience to walk away with. From this slide, I want them to understand what signal is, I want them to understand what noise is, and that we need to optimize that ratio. So the next step is take away the rest of the text so that you just have those keywords. And now you need to try and deliver your message just with those keywords. So now we're starting to decrease our reliance on the slide as a teleprompter, and we're starting to boost our signal on the page and decrease our noise. So now if I were to turn back to my slide, I can't read it to the audience. I have to know my material. Next, go ahead and take everything else away. Take all the noise away so that you just have the signal, and put that on your slide. So here I said minimize signal and noise, or even I could change it to optimize signal and noise. And now I want to try and deliver that message to the audience without any other prompts on the slide. And then if you want to get super fancy, make that into an image, and even incorporate a purposeful animation to say, here's my signal and I want to decrease my noise. All right, so you don't need those bullet points, you don't need those words, you don't need the rest of the noise. You just need to know your material and effectively transmit that signal to the audience. So here's an example from a previous lecture of mine. So this is talking about Florida statistics when it comes to drowning deaths. There's a lot of stuff on here, a lot of noise. I was talking about how Florida leads the nation in deaths. I was talking about statistical ratios when it comes to different age groups, risks by age group. I have a line graph on there that I'm hoping the audience can interpret while they're trying to listen to me, and just a lot of noise going on. So here's some examples of how I changed that. First off, the very first thing was I had made one idea per slide. Okay, so here, this is the first slide. 400. I want the audience to look at that slide, look at the number 400, the state of Florida, and say, okay, well, he's going to talk about something with the state of Florida and something with the number 400. And I can tell them that every year around 400 people die in the state of Florida from drowning. Next slide, I can say, well, toddlers tend to lead age groups when it comes to total death. And I can work my way and say, when it comes to teenagers and adults, they lead the way in natural water, and then toddlers lead the way in pools. So each slide now has one idea, and it sticks to that 3-second rule, so they can look up. There's nothing else for them to read other than see pictures and one word, and then turn their attention back to the lecturer. Now we need to talk about animations. And animations are where we need to focus on purposeful components to a lecture. Audiences look for natural motion. And letters spinning in from the side, bouncing off, and then flipping into place is not natural motion. So there is a place for animations, but we really have to minimize it and make sure it's purposeful. We often include it just to kind of make things fun and spice things up, but that's not a good reason for it. So again, if you're thinking about animations, just really take a second and say, hey, does this animation actually serve a purpose? Does it show a process? Does it help me compare one thing to another? And then just make sure you're using it for the right reasons. So now moving on to images, probably the more common media that we focus on and really spend a lot of time trying to get right. So this is going to be a 30,000 foot view. There is so much to talk about when it comes to optimizing the use of images and editing images, but we're just going to kind of touch the surface on this. So first off, how do we obtain images? Well, that's obviously the first step to talk about. Most of us probably go to a Google search or some other type of search. And what this does is it's a perfect way to obtain images. It shows you the entire internet full of images and every possible thing you can look at. I mean, I just type in congestive heart failure and all these images are now at my fingertips. So what's the problem with that? Is there a problem? Well, there is, because technically it's illegal. All right. Now there are lots of fine points in the legal system talking about this, but we're going to just kind of review one major topic when it comes to obtaining copyrighted material. So what we're going to talk about is fair use. And I am in no way a legal expert, and you should really seek some more information on this. But what essentially fair use is almost a loophole in the legal system that does allow for some leniency when using copyrighted material in education, especially if there's no profit involved. Now, there's 4 main components to fair use, and everything is judged on a case-by-case basis. Okay, just because you meet these components doesn't mean that you're going to meet the recommendations for fair use. Everything's taken on a case-by-case basis. So first off, transformative. So does the piece that you're using, is it used exactly the same as it was when the person made it, or are you actually using it for a different manner and having a different intention with the use? Now, the nature of use, so how it's used in the original content as well. Under the fair use clause, stuff like very fictional things or creative works like original songs, original paintings are going to be much harder to use than stuff that's based on fact. The amount of use, so did you use the entire thing, or did you just use small components of it, especially when it comes to written works? And the market impact, so does your use impact the profitability of the original content to the owner of that content? So knowing that, there's a couple different things we can do to decrease our risk when it comes to using copyrighted material or other people's material. So first off, again, there's the Google search that we can do. To kind of decrease our liability or our risk, we can use something called Creative Commons. And what Creative Commons is a type of licensing. So someone can make an image, they can make a text, they can make a video, whatever they want, put it on the internet, and then they can actually license it under Creative Commons. And what that says is this is anyone's to use. You don't have to go through any copyright issues. You don't often even have to cite the person. It's just free to use. So a couple sites focus on this. Pixabay is one. Flickr, which is a pretty common image site, actually has settings that you can just look for Creative Commons. And Wikimedia also has Creative Commons material. And so Pixabay, it's just like any other image site. You can search for certain images, and it can be very useful. So here I search the term anatomical, looking for medical education material, and I'm actually able to find some pretty good images. And again, these are all free for me to use. Now, the downside of it is searching like congestive heart failure showed no images. So in that regard, if I'm doing a lecture on that, I can't find anything within this website, and it directs me to Adobe stock. Now, That's great and all because you can purchase the license for these images and then be free to use them as well. But if you can look here, that's pretty expensive. I mean, $30 a month, and that gets you just 10 assets or 10 images a month. And if you're doing a full lecture on something like congestive heart failure, often you're using many more images than that, and so it can become pretty costly. If we go to something like iStock, again, a very popular image site, this picture of this heart is $12. So again, if you use 10 different pictures within your presentation, you're going over $100. Now, some university systems or hospitals do have licensing with stuff like Adobe Stock, and so you're then allowed to use the hospital license, but it's not very common. So a way we can avoid this issue is taking your own photos. Become your own photographer. Now, obviously, this takes equipment and practice, and it doesn't have to be the best photos in the world, but if there's something simple you want to put in your presentation, take it yourself. Here's some examples that I use. I had a recent EKG lecture, and I wanted a photo of a physician looking at EKG and getting frustrated, and so I just took it myself. I often like to make fun of myself in my lectures and make myself look stupid, which is not very hard. And so I have my dumb face picture that I like to put in there sometimes. Also, I was doing an ACLS lecture, so I wanted to put medications in there. So just took them out of our med bin and took the right angle that I wanted, the right size. So now I have those images, and I'm able to kind of use them as I wish. So if you want to become even fancier, you can also draw your own images, become your own artist. Now, obviously, again, this takes practice, but it's really not hard. You do this a couple times, especially in something like PowerPoint, and you get the gist of it. And the cool thing about this is you make your own images, they're yours. That's now your property, and you can use them however you wish. And if you kind of stockpile a big library of images you've made, you can then throughout the years use them. Every time you do a heart lecture, you can find your heart images, and you kind of edit them to what you need for that lecture material. So here's one of my recent STEMI lecture. I couldn't find the perfect angle of the heart that I wanted that showed the vasculature very well so I could put different lesions on there, so I just made it myself. And so now I was able to move lesions around and show different parts of the heart, and it's just a simple image. It's nothing fancy, but it gets the point across. In that same lecture, I wanted to show a clot in the coronary arteries and then spontaneous reperfusion. So again, I just made the image, and now that's my image to use. And this is from a colleague of mine, Petra Duran, who focuses on ultrasound. And she has some of the most beautiful images you'll ever see that was just hand-drawn by someone in PowerPoint. And she's had these for years. So the thing is now she can customize these images. She can go in and take out bones. She can take out organs. She can add them in. She can move the ultrasound probe around. And she has a cool little library of images on her computer that she can just customize to what she needs. Now, this takes a lot of practice, all right, but it really isn't that hard. And everything I'm going to show in here is with the basic PowerPoint program and the basic programs on the computer that you don't have to pay extra money for. But again, it just sit down and just do it. So say I wanted an image of a knee, all right, and I found this one, but I didn't really want to pay for it. I was kind of concerned about copyright issues. Well, now I can just kind of make it myself. I can actually put that image into PowerPoint, go up and choose what's called the Freeform. And what the Freeform is almost like a pencil, and I can just kind of draw a line around the image that I want. What I'm doing here is I'm actually drawing that shape with my mouse. Now I'm going to speed up this film so it doesn't take that long, but this whole process you're going to see took me 2.5 minutes. So it really doesn't take long. So the very first thing I did was drew the leg. I then brought the image back to the surface using layering. I then drew a line around the bone, so I had a bone structure there. I then came down to the tibia and drew around that. And again, this just isn't very hard. It takes some fine movements with the mouse, but it's something that you practice and you get used to. Now I'm going to color those white, and then I'm going to go back to the skin and color it more of a skin tone, and boom, 2.5 minutes. And now I have my own knee that I can customize as I want. I can add labels on there. I do this often in my lecture for ultrasound guided procedures. I can now show a joint space, and I could draw a needle, or I can draw an ultrasound probe, and it's a very effective way to get your point across and having an image that works exactly how you need it to. So with everything we talked about, there's a quick little algorithm that you can run through in your brain when you're trying to figure out how to obtain an image. First off, Google search is great because it just gives you a baseline of what's out there. All right, I can search a certain organ or a certain body system and see exactly what's out there to start getting ideas. I can then go to Creative Commons, a site that supports that, and say, okay, can I get this for free? Can I find that perfect picture of the heart I want, or at least one that's close enough and it's free and I don't have to worry about copyright issues? If not, then okay, can I take it myself, or can I draw it myself? And if that doesn't work, all right, well, we'll go back to one of these paid sites and see is it worth the cost? Maybe sometimes it is, especially if your university or hospital has a license with the company. And if all else fails, you just go back to the image search and you say, hey, is it worth the risk to me and my personal perception of risk to use this possibly copyrighted material off of a Google search? So I have to say that, again, this is just my opinion. This does not represent the opinion of my university or my hospital. And this all comes down to, again, your personal perception of risk. I can't say go break the law and use copyrighted material, but as long as you're sticking to fair use policies and using it in education, especially for nonprofit reasons, you're going to be pretty well covered. So, quality of the image. So you've gone out and looked for images. Now how do you ensure that you have a good quality image? We've all had this happen where it pops up on our screen, especially when it's on a big screen, and you suddenly realize, oh crap, that's not a good image, and people are kind of squinting their eyes trying to figure out exactly what it is. Well, one term we need to talk about is resolution. And resolution is the number of little square units of that image within a given space. Okay, so say a square inch, how many little pixels or units of measure are within that square inch? And the more you have, the better quality the picture is. On the left, it's 300 by 300 pixels. On the right, it's 1400 by 1400 pixels. You can see the image on the right is much sharper because within a given unit of measurement, we have more pixels and more units of image within that space. So one way to make sure you have high quality images, if you're doing that Google search, if you go to the size drop down menu and choose large, that'll in general give you larger pictures with more pixels that'll be higher quality. All right, and it's just a really quick tip on how to try to find those better quality images. So you can see by using that image on the right I had before, I can now zoom all the way and get a beautiful picture of the coronary arteries. If I was going to do that with that low quality image, you probably wouldn't even be able to make out what we were looking at. All right, so now we've obtained high quality images. How do we make those images work for us? So first off, again, this takes a lot of practice. You have to really do this over and over again to get the fine touch of what you're doing. It's not hard, you just need to practice it. And all the things I'm going to talk about are built into basic free programs, or at least programs that come with your computer usually, like PowerPoint and very basic editing programs as well. So say I have this picture. All right, this is a very ineffective way to present this picture. All right, I'm not using my real estate, I'm not using my canvas. It's just stuck in the middle in kind of an awkward space with lots of white around it. So the very first way to edit a photo is to just expand it out to the borders. Do what's called bleed off the edges. You shouldn't leave any white space around it unless there's a specific reason you're trying to frame the photo, but bleed off the edges. So that's step one in editing and optimizing your photos. So the same goes for text. This would be an ineffective way to present the fact that I'm going to start talking about congestive heart failure. Again, it looks like something's missing on that slide. So just text is a form of media as well, so bleed off the edges. Use all of your white space. Use all of your real estate. That's a much more effective means for saying, okay guys, I'm talking about CHF. Here's some examples of that from my previous lectures. This was a lecture from a while ago where I was showing this picture, which is the first depiction of a drowning resuscitation from 1237 BC, and I was trying to tell the audience how this was the great of Aleppo who drowned in a river during a battle. And those were his guards who were holding him upside down. Well, I have a lot of noise on the slide. I have a lot of white space for one, unused real estate. I have words that I don't need. Again, I just told you all the information. The audience doesn't need to read it. So I can now bleed my image off the edge. I can use up all my real estate, and I can tell the audience the message I'm trying to get across. We can also see this here. In this slide, I was trying to talk about guidelines for in-water resuscitation. But again, I have a lot of unused space. I have the title that I put on every slide for that presentation, which is really unnecessary. I have a lot of words and algorithms that the audience is going to have to read through now, and a picture that just isn't very effective in terms of the sizing. So what can I do? I can bleed it off the edges, use all of my real estate, and now I can give the message and give the signal to the audience, and then they can turn their attention back to me and hear that message instead of trying to read it off a slide. So next step that we can talk about is cropping. So all cropping means is kind of taking away what you don't want and leaving what you do want when it comes to an image. So there's this image right here, and so cropping essentially is focusing on the part of the image that you want. So maybe I just want that middle part of the photo. I don't want the background all around it. There's a couple ways that we can then crop it and get just the part that I want. Now the first way to do this is use a tool to essentially act like an eraser and take out everything around the image that you want to keep. Now within the Mac operating system, there's an app called Preview, which you use to view PDFs, and there's a tool called Instant Alpha. And what Instant Alpha does is kind of uses computer algorithms to try to figure out what components of the photo you don't want to keep. So as you can see here, I click and I drag my mouse, and it tries to highlight areas in red that it thinks I want to take out, and then I'm able to delete those areas. It's not perfect, and as you can see, it leaves out some spots that I have to go back and delete. It does take some time, but in general, it's not too bad, and it's a nice way to delete very large areas of the image. So again, it just takes time, and you have to sometimes go back and do different areas, but in the end you get a pretty good result with some sharp edges around the image. Now within PowerPoint itself, there's also this feature, and it's called Remove Background. And it's not as good in the new version as it used to be. It used to be much easier to use. It was kind of like Instant Alpha. But now you have to click these buttons on top to tell the computer if you want to keep part of an image or delete part of an image. So again, it takes time. You're kind of going back and forth. You see here I'm trying to keep part of the hand, and now I'm going to go back up and I'm going to choose the option to delete parts. So I'm going to choose this area here that I want to remove. So again, it definitely takes time, but it's a nice, fairly quick and easy way to delete large portions of an image that you may not want to keep. And what you're left with once you do all that is the image, just the part that you want, and everything else and all the background taken out. And this image also now has no background. So I could put this image on top of something else, and it would just, whatever the other image I put on top of, that would now become the background. So now you can get really fancy with it. So like I said, we always want to take up our slide real estate, so you can make this image nice and big, try to almost bleed off to the edge, and maybe I want to use that camera as part of my theme. So again, by using very basic things within PowerPoint, right here I'm just creating a circle, I can now take out the middle of that lens and obscure that area, so now that I have a nice area that I can put some of the other image on. You can see that all these features are just very basic in PowerPoint. It's really nothing fancy. So after doing that, I can go back in my PowerPoint. I can find that nice high resolution image of the heart that we found. Now I'm just going to copy it with a keyboard shortcut, bring it back to this slide. I'm going to paste it on the slide. And then next I'm going to do exactly what we did before. I'm going to choose the option to remove the background, and then kind of adjust that with different clicks to make sure I get all the areas that I want. Now I have a cropped image of the heart with no background. And now with just a little bit of resizing, I can bring it within the camera lens. And that gives me kind of a cool image. So now maybe the theme of my talk is focusing on CHF, and that is a perfect title slide right there. So you can see all this stuff is built into PowerPoint. It's not hard to do, it just takes practice. So that was erasing the background. Another form of cropping is to cut out what you want. And again, there's a couple different tools we can use for this. Within the Paint app on Windows, there is the crop menu here, which you can see rectangular and freeform. And then within the Preview app on the bottom, that's from Mac, they also have different forms of cropping. The most common ones are going to be rectangular and then either freeform or lasso. PowerPoint has its own cropping tool as well, which is up here on the picture format toolbar. And so we'll go back to this image that we had before. So there's a lot of things going on in this picture, but maybe I'm doing a talk just on surgical instruments. And so I just want to have those instruments and nothing else. Well, what I can do in PowerPoint is I can choose the picture, go up to the Format tab, and I can choose that crop tool that I talked about. And what that does is bring up these little bars on the side of the image. And now when I bring those bars in, what that's essentially doing is cutting out the rest of the picture. So it's essentially reframing the picture to exactly what I want. Now you can see the only downside of this is that you can only crop into a rectangular form. There are some more advanced features that you can do different shapes, but in general, the very basic function is just in a rectangle. But now I resize my picture, bleed it off to the edges, and I have a nice big picture that just shows the surgical tools. So going back to this main photo, maybe I want that clipboard. I want to talk about documentation. Now the clipboard isn't a nice rectangle. It also has things like the hand and the pen I'd like to include, so I can't just do a basic rectangular crop. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, in the Mac app in Preview, and again in different apps on Windows, you have the Freeform Crop. What that does is allow you to draw that cut line. So I'm essentially using a pair of scissors. And this takes a lot of practice, It's a lot of fine movements with the mouse or the trackpad, but again, something you just kind of get used to. After a couple frustrating trials, you'll really get used to doing this and have a little better dexterity with it. You can see I'm just slowly going around the border, and now I'm going to include the hand as well. So I'm getting the clipboard and the hand. You can see I'm going all the way down around the sleeve, and then I can kind of come down the bottom of the screen and get that last portion right there. So now I have a freeform cut around exactly what I want. And when on this app, I go up and click the crop button, and there, only the part of the image that I want is there. So now I can go back and make a slide in documentation, and it just has that part of the image that I want. So now I'm going to talk about something a little fancier. It's an effect I really like to use. So we cropped out that part of the picture, the clipboard, we copied it, and now I take that original photo, the whole photo, and I make some artistic effects. And this is all based in PowerPoint. But I blur it out, I add a little transparency, and I can see I have it kind of faded in the background. Now what I like to do is take that cropped photo I had and paste it on top. So now you get this kind of neat effect that the entire picture is there. So all your real estate of your slide is taken up, but the part that you want to pop out, that clipboard to talk about documentation, that's really what the audience is going to focus on. So this has become a little effect that I like to use in my presentations. Again, just to make it looks a little better than that slide before where it just had the clipboard and the Word documentation. So here's an example from one of my drowning resuscitation talks. I like to talk about disposition and what to do with the patients, especially the ones that you can discharge from the hospital. So I went out and searched for an image of a child and mom leaving the emergency department or leaving the hospital, but to kind of talk about what patients can walk out the door. And within this photo were a lot of things I just didn't want. I mainly just wanted to focus on the patient leaving the hospital. And also I wanted to put a couple headlines on there, some key words for people to take home, and they would be obscured by the background if I just tried to put them on top of this photo. So I did that same effect I talked about before, and there I'm able to blur the entire background. Now you can just see this is someone walking out of the hospital, and I can put a couple keywords and headlines on there for the audience to take in. I think this is a really neat effect that really makes a nice looking slide. And now to wrap up the cropping section, we're going to talk about something that's very important in medical education presentation, and that's how to present literature. Now, we all want to present literature and evidence, but we do it in a very ineffective manner. Often we try to put the actual paper or a long quote from the paper, or more commonly the title page of the paper within the slide. And I understand the reasons behind this. You want to present all the accurate information for the citation of the paper and be able to present something that looks nice and scientific. But imagine being the audience, and now you're trying to read and take in all this information from the slide while the poor lecturer is trying to tell you what's important about it. So when you look at this, you're obviously going to read the title, and then you're going to start looking at authors to see, oh, maybe I know some of them. And then you're going to look at the affiliations, and then maybe the title of the journal, make sure it's a good journal, and what year was it. And this entire time, again, the lecturer is trying to give you the signal as to what's important about the paper, and you've completely missed it. So this is a slide from one of my old lectures, but having all that in mind, this is my new slide. And so by putting this up there, I'm able to tell you in 2005, Dr. Papa wrote a paper that found that over 60 years of drowning literature, there were 33 different definitions for drowning. There, I gave you the message, and I could tell you the citation, I can tell you the journal it's in, I can give you that information, but the audience is not getting lost trying to read it while you're trying to give them the message. So now we're going to talk about videos. So why videos? It seems actually kind of like a lot of work to do once you see how we do it, and so why would someone want to actually use this in a presentation? Well, there are a couple good reasons. First off, you might want to show an example of what you're talking about. In my lectures, I like to talk about the different grades of drowning, and I like to show examples of mild drowning. And to show this as a real-world example, you really can't get better teaching. I can't explain it as well as you can see it in a nice real-life video. Additionally, to see real pathology, we're trying to teach med students and residents and other physicians about pathology. It's hard to talk about retractions during a severe asthmatic exacerbation, but in a video, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And then sometimes people just do it better than you. This is a video I like to use in my crashing asthmatic lecture because it's very good animation. The woman has a very nice voice and she explains it very well. So it's just, why do it myself when someone actually does it very well for me? So just like with photos, we have to talk about obtaining videos. And all the same stuff we talked about with fair use applies to videos as well. So we're essentially going to use the same algorithm. You're going to do a basic search and then see if you have Creative Commons access, because videos are on Creative Commons as well. Make your own video if you can. That's the best way. Then see if it's worth purchasing, and if not, then you're just going to find a way to take it off the internet. Now there's a couple different ways to take a video off the internet. First way is screen capture. So what screen capture or screen recording is it actually just records everything that's going on your screen right now. That's how I'm making this lecture right now. Everything that's on my screen is being recorded. And I'm currently using QuickTime. That's the basic video program that comes with Mac, and it's actually a pretty powerful tool. For Windows, there isn't a good one that comes with the computer, but there are some free ones like APowerSoft. There's some very advanced programs that you can use, but this is just for basic screen recording. So in QuickTime, what I would do is go up to File and choose New Screen Recording. And when I do that, I click the record button, and then it's recording every mouse click, every cursor that goes across, everything I do on the screen is getting recorded. So then another way to obtain video is to actually download it from a video source like YouTube. There are lots of video sites out there, but most of them, including YouTube, won't let you just take the video from their platform. You can only view it online. So there's kind of some backdoor ways to do this. First off, the main way I like to do it is to get an app called Firefox. And Firefox is a web browser, just like Internet Explorer, just like Safari, but it's kind of an open source web browser in the sense that other developers can make add-ons to make it the experience better, and to make it so you can do different things that you'd never be able to do on something like an Internet Explorer or Chrome. So within Firefox, if you actually open up the application and then go up to Tools and Add-ons, you can find specific ones to download videos. This one's called Video Download Help or Helper, and this one actually lets you pull videos off YouTube. So once you have that add-on, you can go to YouTube or really any video platform. You can find the video that you want. So here I'm going to search for congestive heart failure. And then once your search terms come up, you'll choose the video that you want to see. When I choose this video, you'll look up in the top right corner of my screen, and it has a little number up there. And that is the add-on that I put into the program. And that is actually showing me the different quality and different types of video that I can download. So once a video starts playing on your screen, this add-on notices a video is playing, and then it allows you to download it from YouTube. So you can see I was able to download it to my computer. And then I can actually, it's now there in a file that I can pull out of my download file and put right into my PowerPoint. See, this is a very effective tool to get videos off the internet. You see here, now I have the exact video I wanted. So how do we edit videos? Again, this takes a whole lot of practice, just like anything else. But if you just do it a couple times, you'll get the basics down and be able to have an effective editing tool. The thing is, a lot of times you have a 15-minute video, but you only want 10 or 15 seconds of it. So with this video right here, I'll show you how I do that first with QuickTime. So QuickTime, again, is what comes with Mac. Windows, again, does not have a good basic program that does this out of the box, but there's something like Shotcut that is actually free and you can download to do this. So in QuickTime, what I would do is I would open that video, and then down here on kind of the timeline down here, I can scroll through that and find the exact point that I want to start that video. So maybe for this video, I just want to show kind of the ventricular contractions and the blood flow. At this point, I can choose the option Split Clip. And Split Clip is like taking a pair of scissors on a film strip, and you just cut that film strip. And so that's my first cut point. So that's where I'm going to start the clip that I want. And now I can scroll through to kind of the end point that I like. And I can go back and choose that same split clip. So wherever my cursor is on that film strip is where it's going to split. So there, now I've split before and I've split after. Now I can go before, and I can go ahead and actually just delete that piece of the film. So now that piece is gone. Now maybe down the film strip I wanted to show the blood flow through the vessel. So again, I can do the same thing I did before. I can bring my cursor on the film strip to that very point. I can choose the split clip. So again, I'm taking a pair of scissors, I'm cutting it. I can then go to the end of the portion that I want, to get it just right. Split it again. And I would just choose those clips that I don't want to include, and I would delete those. And after all that, I can just save it as a new video. So now I just have that 10 or 15 seconds that I want. I can talk about the ventricular contraction. I can talk about the action of the ventricles and what they do. I can talk about the end result of these contractions is that we get blood flow through the arteries. So again, a very easy and effective way to get a video down to what you need. Now, I just want to talk about this because a lot of people asked me after a social media lecture I did last year how I got it to look like a video is playing on an iPhone in a hand. And it just uses the same basic principles I just talked about. So we'll use this same video as an example. If I were to drag that clip video that I just made into my slide, and now you can actually crop video. So just like we talked about with photos, you can use the crop function, and it brings up those same little bars. And now I can actually crop my video, and I can crop it exactly to dimensions I want. So you can see in the background, I'm able to see that phone image, and I just crop it down to the exact dimensions of the phone. And now it will look like there's a video playing on an iPhone in someone's hand. So you can kind of get fancy with this stuff and make it really pop out and make it very unique. So we can see now how that works. So now playing videos. It's important to actually play videos the right way. That seems dumb, but you've gone through all this work of getting the right videos and editing it down, getting high quality and all that good stuff, and now if it doesn't play right, it kind of ruins the whole effect. So we've all had this issue where we're presenting on a topic and we say, okay, now I'm going to show you a video, and here I'm going to go click on this YouTube link right here, and we click it, and then everything just stops. Nothing ruins a presentation like this. Whether it's something wrong with the internet connection or you have the wrong web address or something, your entire lecture comes to a halt and you've now lost the audience. So to avoid that, the very basic thing we need to do is do what's called embedding. So all you need to do now with the current PowerPoint is pull the file into the PowerPoint, and that embeds it in the DNA of the PowerPoint. It used to be that you had to have it in certain file locations, but now with PowerPoint, if you just pull it in there, it's in there. So when you save your presentation and take it to a new computer on a storage drive, it's in there. And this is a good reason why we always need to go to the other computer wherever you're lecturing. Try to go a day before, an hour before, whatever, and just test your presentation, especially if there's videos, because it'll really avoid a lot of badness. But again, dragging it into the presentation now with PowerPoint, it automatically embeds within the presentation. Another couple settings. So when you actually click on the video in PowerPoint, tinker with some of these settings up top that pop up on the playback tab. First off is automatic. Automatic start means that right when that slide opens up, it's going to start playing. I think that's the best way to do it. You just have to anticipate it, because if you're not ready for it to start, then you might have to actually go stop it. But I just know that when my video slide comes up, it's going to start. So what that does, it makes it so I don't have to go on the slide and click that little triangle button. Because again, sometimes that's cumbersome. I might be on the other side of the room talking, and now I have to walk back to the computer and try to find the play button. So automatic just means right when that slide comes up, it'll automatically start playing. Also, figure out if you want volume. A lot of videos, at least in my presentations, I want to talk over the video. I don't want the video talking for me, and there might be music or something I don't want. So if you go ahead and once you put that video in PowerPoint, you go ahead and use that slide bar on the volume tab to mute it, then once you save your PowerPoint, it'll save that way. So once you open up another computer, it'll still be muted, and just avoids you suddenly having to talk over some music or someone else's voice. Now here's some examples from some of my presentations. So I talked about that social media presentation just to show, so the whole point of this was to show how Twitter works on an iPhone. So I was able to actually connect my iPhone to the computer and get a screen recording that showed me going through Twitter. And so I can show someone what a Twitter platform looks like. I can show them what tweets look like and retweets. I can open up an EKG and show how those attachments open up. But again, it's much more effective. We're actually showing a cell phone in someone's hand instead of just the video itself. This is what I think one of the best ways to use video in medical education that some people just don't realize is possible. A lot of times we're using radiography, especially in like M&M presentations or case studies, and it's almost never goes right. You're trying to then open up packs on maybe a different computer or a different platform, and you're having to wait a while for it to open up. Maybe you forgot the patient's identification number. You're trying to switch back and forth between programs, and it's almost always a disaster. So what I do now is when I'm putting together my presentation, I do a screen recording while I'm on PACS on a computer. And then what I can do is scroll through whatever image I want, MRI, CT, whatever. I can scroll through as many different cuts and windows as I want to. I just record that screen capture as a video. So now I embed that video in my presentation. As you can see, what I can do now is I can scroll through that video, and it's just like I'm scrolling through PACS. So it's just like I'm scrolling through an MRI. And now I've actually saved multiple different studies in Windows. So now I can see different weighted images all in one, instead of having to go back and choose, oh, which one's right, which one do I want, what's the patient's identification number. Now I got everything in here. So pretty cool way to use video in medical education. All right, so now we're going to start wrapping the presentation up. I want to show a couple examples that kind of incorporate everything that we talked about. Again, this is all from my lectures in the past. So this is the Spielsman classification for drowning. This used to be my slide to explain the classification, and that is ridiculous. I'm expecting the audience to look at this and be able to decipher it while I'm talking about it. And it's this large algorithm, and it's a really small font, and I thought it was great because I was pulling it straight from New England Journal of Medicine, and it's scientific, and it's just an awful way to present information. So a couple of years, I learned some more stuff, and I decided, okay, I'll put it in a table, and I'll grade them, and I'll put different colors to kind of divide them, and I'll make it simple and just get the important points in there. That was better. But still a lot of information, still 6 different categories that, and again, by the time I'm done explaining category 1, the audience is probably on 6. So then I decided to break it up and do kind of what I did with the bullet points, where I would just talk about one at a time. And that worked. It was a little bit better. But then I just realized, it's still a table, and people don't really like tables. It's nice to minimize tables and graphs and other things in presentations if you don't need them. So then this is my current presentation. I think it's much more effective. Again, it looks nice. I have a very large, high-quality photo that's bleeding out to the edges. I'm using all of my real estate, and I'm now going to do my one idea at a time. And I'm going to try to stick to my 3-second rule. So my one idea at a time, 1 slide per grade. And now when the audience looks at this, they can say, okay, well, this is grade 1. They're talking about the symptoms. They can turn their attention back to me, and I can explain it to them. The next one, I can explain grade 2. You can see I can, in succession, just go through these different grades, talk about the high points of each one, and it's presented in a much more effective manner. This was an old slide that talking about the BLS and ACLS for drowning resuscitation and how you need to treat these patients. So very bland, lots of noise with bullet points, lots of words, just kind of boring in general. And again, it's going to be distracting for the audience. So now, this is, again, doing one idea per slide. I'm able to say, okay, here's a hypoxic arrest. Here's a drowning patient. And very first, the reason these people drown is because they have a lack of oxygen. So that lack of oxygen leads to cardiac decompensation. And I can then explain that that's like an empty tank of gas. That's why we need to give ventilation to these patients, because they're starting with an empty tank of gas. It's not that their engine is broken. And I can then continue to talk about why ventilations are so important in these patients. So you saw with that, it was one idea per slide. It was very large, high quality images, bleeding out to the edges, decreasing the noise, and increasing my signal. And this was another slide that I had about treating hypoxia and being the one that jumps out of the truck with the bag valve mask, because any amount of oxygen you give is better than 0. My whole point I want to drive home, the whole signal, is no matter what you do, if it's greater than 0, it's the right thing to do. And so now this is my current slide. It's one of my favorite slides, and I think it's one of the more effective ones. I even had someone make a t-shirt of this slide. The whole point is 21 is greater than 0. And it just, that pops out, and there's no question what the point I'm trying to get across. And I don't have all that noise. I've boosted my signal. The audience knows exactly what I'm trying to tell them, and it's been a much more effective manner to present that information. All right, so this is going to wrap up. We talked about 3 overriding themes when it comes to presenting effective presentations. And those were restraint and preparation, so keeping it simple from the very start, simplicity in design, and the last one is naturalness in delivery. And the reason I put this photo up is because this is my natural state. This is me presenting to surfing medicine doctors in Portugal. The beach and good break is right outside the window there. I have no shoes on. I'm in comfortable clothes. That's naturalness in delivery. So that's one way to stay natural. But the other way is to practice. Research this, look into it, learn the best techniques, learn your own techniques, do it over and over and over again. And that is how you become natural. So that was optimizing media and medical education. I hope you enjoyed it. I cannot thank you enough for watching this. Again, that link right there has everything you need to know. It has a handout that has all the major points I talked about. It has links to references and those books that I talked about, and also has the contact information. I welcome any contact at any point, and thank you again for listening to this.